Welcome to The Record Show, your virtual spin around the vinyl industry. Brought to you by Radio Wasteland Records. Yes, Midland has a record store. Here's your host, Jim Gleason.
Greetings from the Wasteland, and welcome to another edition of The Record Show. We've got a fun one headed your way today, and by that I mean hopefully humorous. We'll take a closer look at what I'm going to officially dub the Dad Joke Anthem. And we'll travel to the land of cheese curds for a spin from the wasteland. But first, on last week's episode, I talked a little bit about bluegrass music, more precisely my current infatuation with modern forms of bluegrass. In that segment, I talked a little bit about the artists Bella Fleck and Jerry Douglas and highlighted a couple of new additions to my collection from them. Well, as is typically the case as a collector, sometimes you forget what you've already got. And I did mention that I had really been collecting bluegrass, but never really concentrated too much on that. Well, after the segment aired, uploaded, so to speak, I went back and was looking through some other parts of my collection and found that I did indeed have more Bella Fleck, this one in the form of Echo in the Valley by Bella Fleck along with Abigail Washburn. It's a good album, not quite my favorite stuff from him or her, but still some good. But even more importantly, especially since I mentioned Jerry Douglas along with Bella Fleck and working separately, I have an album called Snakes Alive by a group called the Dreadful Snakes. And in this group, among some other folks, is a very youthful Bella Fleck as well as a very youthful Jerry Douglas. So I've had this in my collection for a couple of years and remember getting it, remember listening to it, but for some reason just kind of blanked on that when I was putting together last week's segment. So again, I guess I do have some other bluegrass. By the way, I got a lot of other great suggestions in the comment section from you folks suggesting other bluegrass artists to take a look at. And I will get to those and start delving a little bit further into that. But that also does remind me, please feel free to leave a comment on any of our segments, as well as make sure you hit that like button. And if you have not done so yet, please hit subscribe. That means a lot to us in helping this channel grow and helps me get the motivation really to do this week after week, especially trying to get a record store run at this time of year with the Black Friday event coming up very, very quickly. Well, speaking of all of that, let's take a quick look at this week's new releases, really the highlights of this week's new releases as we barrel toward Record Store Day. I'm doing this by myself this week. Ken is really, really busy getting those orders ready for stores like ours for that event coming up on Black Friday. So this week, the biggest of, well, there's a couple of big ones this week, but the biggest one that we're probably not going to see too much of, because this is another major label screw job, is a reissue of Nirvana's Nevermind. And this is the 30th anniversary edition of this. The description says it's been digitally remastered and expanded. So that edition comes with a bonus single with the song Endless Nameless and the B-side of Even in His Youth and Aneurysm. So when I say that you may or may not see this at your local record store, this is because this is one of those titles that the big labels have determined needs to be rationed, meaning that smaller stores like ours here at the Wasteland have to buy through an intermediary, a distributor, if you will, and cannot buy directly from the label. And so when that happens and the label gets a release like this that is a limited edition, and they determine that they're going to ration that, that means that they're sending out their supplies directly to the big stores. But that also means that the distributors are getting fewer copies, which means that smaller stores like ours will get fewer copies. I'm not expecting to see this in at all. Maybe we'll get some down the line, but make sure you check with your local record store. The bigger ones, indie record stores, I don't think they're going to have a problem getting copies of this. But the smaller ones, they may not have many, so that could be something to watch out for. The other big release, and again, the same thing, rationed a little bit, but I think we here at our store are going to be okay with this, is the Taylor's version of the album Red. Now, this is a 4 LP set being reissued by Taylor Swift. If you're unfamiliar with this whole piece of drama, she is essentially re-recording all of her old albums so that she has more control over the distribution. There was a little spat between her and the label. Go figure, a label acting like this. Regardless, this album is also going to be a very in-demand one this coming week, so be on the lookout for that. And once again, this is Taylor Swift's re-recording of her 2012 album Red. And as I mentioned, they've expanded this into a 4 LP set. And it's going to be a bit pricey because of that, coming in at around $50 for a manufacturer's suggested retail price. Also due this week is a new release from Lana Del Rey, this one called Blue Banisters, coming out as a double LP set. And we've got a compilation coming from Carrie Underwood. This is the Greatest Hits, Decade #1. So I would imagine that there'll be some more down the line in this, but this is a double LP compilation of Carrie Underwood's Greatest Hits, available for the first time on vinyl, so be on the lookout for that. Christmas music-wise, we have got a reissue of She and Him, a very She and Him Christmas. Can you believe this is the 10th anniversary edition of this? And if you're unfamiliar, this is Zooey Deschanel and M. Ward, originally released in 2011. And it's some very cool renditions of Christmas songs. Now, what makes this one special this week is they're including a bonus 7-inch, and it's on silver-colored vinyl. So be sure to watch for that one coming out if you're looking for some cool Christmas music. Also on the slate this week is Heavy Load Blues by Government Mule, double LP set coming out on both an indie-exclusive colored blue vinyl and a black vinyl version. And then finally, kind of sneaking this one in here, is an Eagles album, Live at the Forum, 1976, a double LP set. Features 10 songs that were recorded in the fall of 1976, just prior to the release of Hotel California. So those are some of the highlights from this week's new releases, hopefully headed to an independent record store near you. Okay, folks, so as a father, I have a deep, deep obligation to both of my children. Even though they're grown and they've left home and have gone their separate ways, they still need to know that I'm there for them, providing the best, or worst if you will, dad jokes to them on a near daily basis. It was a big part of their growing up, and as their kids, they're a little more captive. But in a way, now that they're grown and gone, it makes it a little bit easier because I can just text them my dad jokes whenever the moment arises, and they can just ignore me as they will. But I know they're getting them, and I know deep down they do appreciate them. Okay, so you're scratching your head, and maybe you don't know, but what is a dad joke? Well, according to Wikipedia, a dad joke is a short joke, typically a pun, presented as a one-liner or as a question and an answer, but not for narrative. Generally inoffensive, dad jokes are stereotypically told with sincere humorous intent, of course, or to intentionally provoke a negative reaction to its overly simplistic humor. Thanks a lot, Wikipedia. And the fact that I had to go to that site to give a definition of a dad joke could possibly be a dad joke in and of itself. So where am I going with all of this? A week or two ago, we had an album come through the store, and it made me remember that I once had another album by this gentleman named Kip Addotta. Now, Kip Addotta was a stand-up comedian through the 60s and 70s, with frequent appearances on shows like The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, The Mike Douglas Show, American Bandstand, and Don Kirshner's Rock Concert. He even did game shows like the Hollywood Squares and Make Me Laugh, and he was a repeat offender on the Dr. Demento radio show, which as a kid myself, I was a big, big fan of. Now, Kip Addotta released a handful of records, but one song in particular stands out, and that's what we're going to call the Dad Joke Anthem. And that song is 1984's Wet Dream.
I was driving in downtown Atlantis. My Barracuda was in the shop, so I was in a rented Stingray, and it was overheating. So I pulled into a Shell station. They said I'd blown a seal. I said, fix the damn thing and leave my private life out of it, okay, pal?
Now, obviously told from the perspective of the fish, this is just an ongoing set of puns throughout the entire record, and that's what makes it fun. Somewhat, maybe fringe offensive if you let yourself think that way, but heck, he's just a fish singing about fish stuff. Now, the song Wet Dream did appear first in 1984 on the EP White Boy Rap, with some stand-up and a cover of Chantilly Lace, an adaptation of Chantilly Lace by Kip Addotta, and another original song called White Boy Rap. But Wet Dream is the one that really made Kip Addotta stand out. That song again appeared a year later on the album The Comedian of the United States. And that's the one I had at some point. I can't seem to locate it right now. It's probably floundering around somewhere on my back shelves. Apologies for that. So if you get a chance, look for Kip Addotta. The video itself is out there on YouTube, and it's very, very, very 80s, I guess, if there's a way to think of a music video in that fashion. But it's a fun one regardless.
But she said things I just couldn't fathom. She was too deep, seemed to be under a lot of pressure. Boy, could she drink. She drank a lot. I said, "What's your sign?" She said, "Aquarium." I said, "Great, let's get tanked."
And finally today, since we're having so much fun with musical comedy, or is that comedy music, I thought we'd head to our neighbors to the west. Actually south if you live into UP, but talking about the state of Wisconsin and a guy by the name of Charlie Berens. You may have seen Charlie bombing around on the YouTubes. He hosts the very popular Manitowoc Minute on his channel, as well as a host of other comedic things about life in the Midwest, the upper Midwest, if you will. But he has an album out there, yes, an honest-to-goodness vinyl. It's called Berens and Gruel Unthawed, and this is Charlie and his comedy partner singing songs about living in Wisconsin. Songs throughout include Ope Nope, The Supper Club Shuffle, Wintertime in Wisconsin, Going Up North, The Old Wisconsin Jubilee, and Oofda, which is a great take on Hallelujah.
Well, it goes like this: spring forth the myth of finding love at the quick trip, a second chance, a romance. Oofda, 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 oofda.
Now, for the uninitiated, oofda is a upper Midwest slang for really expressing surprise. If I could put it in other terms, and I lived up in the UP for a while, so I can safely say this, it's the equivalent of holy wah. We'll kick that out there for the Uper friends of ours. In fact, being in the UP might as well have been Wisconsin for a lot of intent and purposes. So that's what makes this really a fun album. Now, Berens did put this out as a very limited edition available through his website. We even managed to get an autographed copy, so that's kind of a cool addition to any collection you've got out there. So check out Charlie's channel, and if you get a chance to find a copy of this, it's a funny one to have, especially if you like that upper Midwest humor. Thanks for watching The Record Show. If you haven't done so yet, please make sure to subscribe to the Radio Wasteland Records YouTube channel. And be sure to hit that notifications bell so you'll be alerted every time we upload new content.